Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my great pleasure to welcome Rich Cohen from Elevate Packaging to the pod. Welcome, Rich.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure to have you along for the ride today. And we both attended B2B Online Chicago, which just recently happened last week. I spent a lot of time in the air. I went from Puebla, Mexico to Houston to Chicago, was in Chicago for the few days for the conference, then flew to LA, to Brisbane, then to Auckland. So I'm in Auckland for the next month or so. So it's been a lot of time in the air, and I'm happy to be on the ground again, that's for sure.
That's awesome. I spent some time in Puebla. I studied there at University of Americas, and wonderful city. Wonderful city.
Wow. Yeah, I live there now. I'm originally from Southern California, lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, and then my wife and I last year moved to Mexico. We traveled around Mexico for all of 2023, just deciding where we felt like we could make a home, and we loved Puebla the most. Puebla wasn't even originally on our short list for a place to live, but UNAM there is huge. It's got a lot of international students there. I can't believe I had no idea until we jumped on this call that you had spent any time in Puebla. So what a coincidence, right?
Yeah, I spent a summer there studying Mexican literature and Spanish at La UDLA, Universidad de las Americas. Yeah, Cholula is a nice little town too. Make sure if you haven't been there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, already spent time in Cholula. In fact, when I head back, my wife and I we're going to be staying in Cholula for a couple of months as soon as we get back to Mexico. So no, we're looking forward to it. Cholula is amazing. The restaurants there are amazing. The Zocalo there is amazing. There's a lot of festivals that happen in Cholula. There's a lot of little restaurants and cafes down little alleyways. It's a pretty special place, that's for sure.
I'm jealous. I wish I was there. It's a great place.
Look, when you come back to Mexico, you got a place to stay. So hit me up when you're next in Cholula or Puebla, and the first round of margaritas are on me.
That's awesome.
You're based in Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So B2B Online Chicago is easy for you to attend and speak at, which is how I found out about you. Actually, I didn't know about your business. I didn't know about you, and when I saw you on the speakers list, I was like, man, got to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, I actually started out at Grainger, and I worked in technology and strategy there for the majority of my early part of my career, and then started this business, Elevate Packaging, in the year 2000. And because I love technology and sustainability, I'm always living in the intersection of those two things.
Wow, Grainger, man, I tell you, you can't go to a B2B conference or be involved in any industrial product or packaging, even related tangentially to the industry, without running across Grainger, McMaster Carr, like all the majors there, Caterpillar. They seem to feature in I think 1 out of 3 or 4 articles on DC360, and they're the poster child for getting B2B commerce right. So what a great place to hone your craft, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was there in the very early days working in advanced technology when there was this new thing that we had learned about called the internet, and was involved in writing some initial white papers and leading some of the initial concepts of that space.
And what have you learned as you have grown up and matured in this space, and presumably in the packaging business? That's the interesting thing around B2B, right? We're not moving just these individual packets door to door. We're moving cartons, pallets, containers of product. And so the reality is that when you work in the B2B space, the logistical elements of service delivery, of product delivery, et cetera, the complexity grows exponentially because the volumes that you're dealing with are growing exponentially. And so this puts you at the tip of the spear of being able to help these large scale B2B brands be efficient at what they do, being able to move products safely from point to point without damage, being able to make sure that they are doing it in a relatively eco-friendly way as best as they can, making sure that the packaging isn't too heavy, making sure that it's not too light, and making sure that things like recyclability, sustainability, things like compostability, all these things start to come into play with packaging. And I know that when I was still running e-commerce for brands and I was working inside of brands as opposed to as an external consultant, packaging was not just around how to get a product from A to B, but it was a significant part of the branding. The unboxing experience was very important. Packaging serves so many purposes, and it has so many roles to play within the success of a business, but people that are outside the industry sometimes don't think of it that way.
Yeah, it's true. It's the simplest thing and the most complex thing at the same time. So when we look at some very simple solutions we offer, like a simple poly bag, it's a monolayer poly bag. It's around us every day of our lives. We don't think too much about these things. When we grab a box of cereal or a stand-up pouch of whatever it might be, we just take all those things for granted. But there's a lot of technical, first of all, there's a lot of technical details to making those things operate successfully, not just in terms of performance related to functioning, but performance in terms of preserving what's inside, the barrier properties like oxygen, moisture. That all is extremely technical. Colors, and then all the points of all the value that packaging brings to you, not only protecting the product inside, but also distributing that product, and then on the shelf, communicating what that product is. And so it's very complex. So adding the dimension of compostability throws on another layer of complexity, which is what we do. And there are two levels of complexity with compostability. One is that the item must be compostable, and the other that it should get composted, right? So what's the point of having a compostable piece of packaging that performs beautifully, does all that it has to do, but then doesn't get composted? So at Elevate, what we've focused on, our mission is actually unique. We're not really a packaging company per se. In fact, I call us the anti-packaging company because our mission is a little bit different than most packaging companies. Our mission is to eliminate plastic waste and to re-enrich the planet. So because that's our mission, we are dialed in and focused on circular packaging, packaging that actually works its way through the entire circular loop of being created, serving its purpose to protect and carry a product, and serving its purpose to enable the consumer to use the product through its useful life. And then when the packaging's done its job, that it gets actually composted.
It's such an interesting thing you bring up because when I was at HealthPost, and I was still working inside the brand at HealthPost, we were an eco-conscious, eco-friendly brand. We were selling eco-friendly health products, natural health foods, supplements, etc. And so we spent about 6 months when we were looking, we took a very holistic look at all of our packaging, both inbound and outbound packaging, both through our suppliers as well as our outbound packaging. And what we soon discovered is that even when we tried to do the right thing, it was an absolute minefield of what the right thing actually is within the context of current technology. So when we were looking at compostable bags, poly bags, compostable bags, and when we were looking at compostable cartons, etc., what we found is that compostable doesn't necessarily mean easily compostable. And oftentimes what it meant was they had to be exposed to air. They had these rules around compostability. It would say, okay, it couldn't just be buried and automatically break down over a certain period of time. It had to be exposed to air for a certain period of time. It had to be exposed to sun for a certain period of time. There were certain rules around what made this product compostable. And oftentimes what we found is that the criteria for compostability, the barrier to being able to call something compostable was so low that oftentimes being able to compost that item was so complex that 9 times out of 10, what people would usually do, and we did this through some consumer research that we did, was that oftentimes when people see compostable on something, they assume what that is, then it's recyclable, automatically recyclable as well. And compostable usually means that it's not recyclable as a result. So what we found is most people were putting these compostable items in their recycling. And then of course that ended up just in landfill because it wasn't actually recyclable. It was compostable, but not recyclable. So what we found was when we went to fully recyclable packaging, that usually had a better uptake by the consumer of actually separating that out and putting it into the recyclables than trying to figure out a way. That's great that this is compostable, but how do I compost it? So what we found is this was an absolute minefield as a brand trying to do the right thing by people and planet. it was really hard to do the right thing.
Yeah, I understand completely. Human change and change management, and then all the infrastructure needed to change takes a huge effort. And especially when the technology is new, innovative, and evolving. And we've seen this time and time again in our history, right? Something like the automobile. The automobile was heavily criticized when it was first introduced because it couldn't get through the mud nearly as well as a horse. Why would anyone want an automobile? And when it got 30 miles out, it wasn't able to eat hay and keep going. When you're introducing new concepts and new systems and they're not fully mature, it's easy to look at where it is at that point in time and criticize it against the more established and well-entrenched incumbent solution. Compostable packaging is a little bit like in that space. Like the automobile, where there weren't gas stations all over, there were super highways going from New York to California. It was just one little car, black Model Ts. It's hard to envision a world where there'll be a Caterpillar earth-moving machine and superhighways and all that stuff. So I think with compostable, we have other challenges with infrastructure, education, adoption, consistency across the network. There's a lot to do there. But the reasons and the motivations are huge, right? We're facing a world where there's microplastics everywhere, like all over from the North Pole to the South Pole. It's in mother's breast milk that they're feeding to babies. And I think there was a lawsuit in some town in the United States here where they were suing the town for microplastics in the water. But there's microplastics everywhere. But my point is, I think we've gained awareness recently. Plastics were introduced in like the 50s and 60s without all this full knowledge, like cigarette smoking, right? No one realized how dangerous these things were. And then as we start to learn more, we're also seeing health concerns about endocrine disruption. And some people are connecting it to plastic. There's quite a bit of research that still has to be done, but I think there's two things. One is there's a huge motivation and awareness that's been developing for people to move away from plastics to sustainable solutions. But then the second part is shifting all of that is like a massive infrastructure shift that requires a lot. Like everything that you were saying, education, access to composting, information, the solutions are there more and more every day. Like I said, our company has a wide range of solutions that completely eliminate plastic, and they function just as well or better. Everything that we focused on are adhesive-based solutions like stickers and tape, and all the way to all kinds of flexible packaging, shrink, tamper-evident seals, stand-up pouches, bags, even stretch wrap for pallets. So everything in the flexible realm we've worked on developing, and most of that's been developed in the last 10 years and less. What we're seeing is a massive shift in terms of what's possible technically to replace plastic, and a need to start to figure out how to identify it, sort it, collect it. And I also think fundamentally the concept of packaging and what to do with used packaging is different. In the original days, packaging was seen as a waste. So the organization that helped us handle that was Waste Management. And they would pick up bins and garbage cans full of stuff you don't want, throw it in the back of a truck, put it into a hole in the ground and throw dirt on it and bury it. But then in the 70s, this new concept of, well, let's start recycling came into play. And that same organization might not have been the best to choose, but the Waste Management organization was chosen. And the way they decided to process it wasn't so great either with the recycle bins. And what we see today, 50 years later, is about, maybe if we're lucky, 10% of our plastic is actually recycled. After all that effort, the second garbage truck coming, the additional bin at your house, the additional recycling facility, we're only getting about 10% of plastics recycled. Using that same system for composting won't make a lot of sense, although that's the only card that people are playing. I think it needs to shift from waste management to materials management, because these are raw materials that are now used in a new process, which is composting. And that composting process is sensitive to the quality of the material. It works on a combination of carbon and nitrogen, and the sources need to be the right amount, the right quality at the right time. And that's a very different model than waste management, where you're picking up loads of stuff in different quantities, different kinds of materials, and it's not known. So it's a very different process. So I just want to share that perspective with you, because it shows I think the dynamics that are many pieces of the puzzle that need to be sorted out collectively to make it work effectively, which is in motion. This is a really rapidly growing space. It seems like it's going too slow. At the same time, it's going extremely fast.
And there's three, as far as I know, because I don't work in your space, so I don't know whether this is new or old technology, but there seems to be three fairly recent developments that are starting to help make this type of, both at the source of the packaging better, but also at the end of life, making that better in terms of the way we handle it and the way we sort it and the way we distribute it and reuse it and recycle it. I think the three things that seem to be working in our favor now, maybe that weren't before, is first of all the advent of plant-based plastics. That seems to be, I'm just shocked that I don't still see plant-based plastics everywhere. There are certain products that I buy that say, hey, this plastic bottle, for example, 100% plant-based, 100% plant-based plastic. There's no oil-based plastic here. The second thing is non-toxic inks and other products that go on and inside packaging, whether that be the fill, whether that be like a cornstarch fill, whether that be, there's different, one of the issues we had at HealthPost was trying to find non-toxic inks that we could have printed on our poly bags, on our cartons, etc., that were biodegradable, non-toxic, that would just break down easily with no leachate, no issues whatsoever. That was a real challenge. And the inks that we found that fulfilled that criteria sometimes maybe didn't have the durability on the packaging as it went through the transiting process, rubbed off, bled. There were some real challenges around finding inks and printing products and even labels that were eco-friendly, but that also met all of our needs as a brand. So I think that was the first challenge. Finding plant-based plastics, also a challenge. Finding eco-friendly filler products, whether that be paper, cornstarch, whatever it might be, that were not oil-based, foam-based products. That was difficult. And then the final thing that I'm seeing in the marketplace is that doing the separation of products before landfill, but at a sorting center using AI now, and automatic robotic sorting based on products that it can be identified, and then only leaving a tiny amount of that left for human sorting that the computer and computer vision cannot sort. Though the combination of those three things feels like part of the solution.
I think you're totally right. Like I said, this is a very complex problem to solve. I think it takes time and it's progressing. As I mentioned, it seems like it's going slow because we just can't get there fast enough. It's a problem we want to address. Just, wow, that's a plastic bag. Seems like a simple thing. There's so many nuances, complexities to that. Just like this whole system, it seems like it should be simple enough. Why can't we just have compostable packaging and then put it in a compost bin and be done with it? There are so many pieces to that puzzle, and they're multiplicative. So just like you said, you might have a compostable bag, but is the ink now compostable? Because then that has to be put on the bag. And does the bag receive the ink well? Because maybe you'll have a compostable ink, but it doesn't like to receive it very well. And then the coating. And so all these things must, like lining up the stars, you need to have all these things work together. And that's what we've done. That's what we've done in the 20 plus years that we've been around at Elevate Packaging. It's been a journey of innovation and R&D, because we've constantly been exploring how to get all these components working. And we have that. Today we have an amazing solution set that addresses those problems that you raised. The ink on the packaging, the coatings, making sure the ink doesn't scratch or bleed. Those are all very challenging things to do. And that's why I say, coming back to packaging, it's complex enough by itself. And now to throw that requirement that you have to be certified compostable with all these other performance requirements, with all those materials working together. It's a tricky needle to thread. But I believe that we've made massive progress. That's why I say it's moving fast but slow at the same time. We've made massive progress. We have, like I said, now today at Elevate, we've got all kinds of flexible films, from stretch film to shrink film to multi-laminate pouches, printed, unprinted, full color, high quality products that work, function, and act just like regular products. Now, I think the big part that you've also mentioned is now that you have a compostable solution, functions beautifully, can be produced reasonably in the time frame that's needed. How do you get these things composted now when they're finished? The other organization that Elevate Packaging partners with is the Compost Stewardship Institute. And that organization takes the burden off of that sorting. There's definitely AI will help, as you mentioned, but Compost Stewardship partners with the brands themselves to take that full responsibility of helping that brand get it collected, get it sorted, and get it composted. So it's a combination of certification of the item being compostable and then the reverse logistics of getting back those materials and getting them composted. So that kind
Wow.
of completes the circular loop there. Yeah.
Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you, and now back to your listening. Yeah, it almost feels like maybe having to return to base, or if it needs to be fully circular, that may not always be, especially when you're talking cross-border trade, international shipping. It starts to all of a sudden feel like maybe if these raw materials at the sorting center or at the waste disposal center or at the transfer station or whatever it is that we're talking about, it feels like if these products could be seen as a valuable resource at that point, wherever that point may be internationally, that then composting that and turning that into an enrichment product for gardens or various other things, it feels like that seems like it's more workable than trying to close the loop back with the original supplier or the original shipper of the goods or whatever, because there's so much complexity in the supply chain internationally that it feels like trying to close the loop on an individual org basis is going to be a really heavy lift. But if the people who are at every point of both the supply chain and the waste disposal chain try to better execute on the opportunity of waste as a resource,
Yes.
that has a commercial value, because if you build commercial value into something, then businesses and an entire ecosystem will spring up around that. So I think it's about how do we make waste sorting, recycling, upcycling, composting, how do we make that so valuable to the supply chain that all of a sudden the market works out the best way to get that back into the system as a natural resource. And so it feels there's lots of moving parts to this, but that has to be part of the solution.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that. I think the way we think of it today is fundamentally different than what it will be. And what I mean by that is the way we've conditioned our minds to think about packaging is that it's a piece of waste. You're done with it, you throw it away. And we will, and also it's collected by a garbage truck or by a very large industrial municipal process. We're already seeing that evolve. So what's interesting is organically, because like you said, the money talks, right? Organically, that industry has evolved from that model. Small compost pickups in communities. You don't have that in the waste industry where there's a small little guy that'll come and pick up your garbage for you. But that's evolved out of not only necessity, but practicality. And so what they're identifying is that material you have is of value. You could pay me, I'll pick it up, I'll put it into another process, which makes it soil, and I'm going to sell the soil. So in some ways, that model is going to be somewhat financed by the sale of the compost. That is what's emerging. So from an infrastructure perspective, we're starting to identify that compostable materials are of value and should be segregated, picked up potentially separately. Instead of a large municipal system, it might be a micro local community system. The way that composting is evolving, instead of large industrial and commercial composters that are composting primarily landscape waste, we now have small community-based composters that are composting all the compostable materials that they collect. And I don't know what that's going to look like in the future, but I believe that as we shift this model from a highly centralized to a decentralized collection and composting, and from a waste perspective to a materials management perspective, we're going to see a new way of handling this material. And I think it's starting to surface slowly, but it's a new concept, so it's taking some time to take shape.
And do you see a future where effectively all compostable packaging is treated in exactly the same way that green waste is treated today? Because at least here in New Zealand, and to a lesser degree in Mexico, in my experience, but in some places it is, green waste is gold. It's treated as gold, right? It's chipped down. If it's branches, trees, whatever, foliage, it's chipped down. If it's grass clippings, it's mulched.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put it through an entire compost treatment plant where all the harmful microbes are removed, and then it's perhaps open air composted for a period of time, cycled through, and then in a period of say 2 weeks, it's broken down very rapidly in the right conditions into something that approximates mulch that can then be redeployed into the garden sector, bagged up, resold, whatever. And I wonder if the compostables need to be brought into that whole green supply chain in some way, so that they are treated in the same way, that they are processed in the same way, that they're redistributed in the same way, because that stuff has serious value in the market. Because I know when I go to the garden center and I'm trying to buy organic compost, you're paying for it. It's not cheap stuff to buy.
Yeah, that's exactly what's evolving. It's a complex thing to develop, but I was just talking to a composter just yesterday, and what they've now started to do is create different kinds of compost for flowers versus compost for vegetables. And obviously, as you do that, you create more value. That's why I say that it's under this innovation and R&D process that's taking shape. And like, even again, coming back to how we compost, I was focusing more on conventional ways of taking something and putting it into a pile and it biodegrades. There are also new developments for a kitchen countertop. They're not composters, but they're taking organic material and creating a soil amendment, like it dehydrates it. And I was just speaking to one of the manufacturers of that last week when I was speaking at Waste Expo, and he was telling me that they're finding that these soil amendments actually have a lot of value to the soil. It's similar to compost. It's different, but it has a lot of nutrients that go into get returned back to the soil. That's why I say there's so much work that's being done and a lot of energy being put into this. I agree with you entirely that this is going to be green gold once we're figuring it out step by step. And I just think it's going to look, in the end, it's going to look so different than what waste management looks like today. And it's hard to conceive what that looks like because there are so many moving parts to this. There are so many moving parts. But for Elevate's perspective, the way we've handled it is we offer our customers, we try to keep it simple for them. Here's the compostable packaging. It functions just like regular packaging. When you're done with it, we pick it up for free. And our partners at Compost Stewardship will pick it up. They'll pick it up and get it composted for you. And that model, that system is going to improve, evolve, and there are inefficiencies that are inherent in new systems, and making it more efficient and more effective will be what we'll keep on driving towards. But yeah, I think about that system. We're bringing it back from the brand and getting it composted. So the goal there will be to shorten the miles and get it done more effectively and more efficiently.
And is it ultimately your goal to move up the supply chain? Because as of today, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you're primarily focused on getting products from point A to point B and along the shipping and supply chain process. But is it ultimately your goal to also move up the supply chain, meaning when a manufacturer literally makes a razor or any kind of consumer good or any kind of B2B good that needs to go inside of a physical package or a water bottle or whatever it might be, is it ultimately your goal to be part of that solution supply chain that when they have to put it in a blow molded package, this razor in a blow molded package with a cardboard backing or something like that? Is it ultimately your vision to try to move up in the supply chain to all forms of packaging, physical goods packaging, or is it your focus really to mainly focus on the supply chain after the manufacturing process has been completing goods to customers?
That's a very good strategic business question. So when we started, there was no supply chain, there was no distribution. For example, if we wanted to make a stand-up pouch, we would not only have to get the laminated structure and the raw materials, the laminated structure, but we'd actually have to manufacture the laminated structure. And to do that, we would have to get resin to blow a film and then get another film, a barrier film, independently buy those resources, and then contract to have it laminated, then contract to have it made into a bag, and Elevate uniquely because it was one of the first companies in compostable packaging had to build a vertically integrated supply chain, and we still use that today. In a way, it's not something we want to let go of because it's enabled us to move really quickly and reliably and control the supply chain. And in compostables, it's actually really essential because one fundamental difference is these materials are perishable by the nature of them being. It's not like plastic or recycled plastic where you could make those solutions and hold them in a warehouse for 2 or 3 years or build up inventory. So because this has two things. One, it's perishable and it's expensive. So you don't want to make too much that you can't consume. You want to make sure you're making the right amount and consuming it all. So, like I said, control of the entire supply chain is helpful because we're planning that out, especially during COVID with the supply chain challenges. We were fortunate not to experience any supply chain issues, and we were dealing with compostable materials. But coming back to your question, though, strategically, I think we can live on either side of the fence, frankly, and you can't do everything all the time. I think that's really difficult. But where we're really focused is the last mile, ripping out a page from the Grainger strategy playbook, focusing on that customer relationship, understanding the customer thoroughly, providing them a full basket of goods to solve all their needs. Because at the end of the day, we don't see ourselves as packaging suppliers. We see ourselves as companies that are enabling brands to be sustainable. And when they want to be sustainable, they don't want only a bag or a label or pallet wrap. They want everything. They want to reduce their plastic and improve their carbon footprint by eliminating all those plastic solutions. Again, similar to Grainger, there's great value in us being able to provide the whole basket of goods to the customer and solve their problem of reaching sustainability goals.
It's ambitious, certainly, even trying to be the end-to-end last mile supplier of logistics solutions that around packaging, packaging that gets products, even if it's just the outers of the packaging that gets goods from point A to point B. It's ambitious to be able to provide all of the inputs required at every step along that last mile of the supply chain. That in itself is very ambitious. It's very exciting. I'm thankful that people like you exist in the world. I'm grateful that people like you have a vision of a future that looks at these inputs as future resources to be able to be reused in a circular way. I think that there's not enough of you out there in the world. And so I'm always going to try to fly the flag for people like you that have this concept in mind that, hey, yes, we have to be commercially viable in order for the brands that we work with to be commercially viable, in order for these to have a commercial value in the world. we have to add value along every step of the supply chain for us to be able to continue to live on as a business in our own right, but also to encourage uptake of these products in the world. We have to almost build the business case around this at the same time, and we have to build the whole end-to-end supply chain model wrapped around this that is commercially viable. So we're not just trying to create products and services. We're trying to create an entire ecosystem,
Mhm.
and that's a big thing to take on as a brand.
Yeah, it is. It's a big necessary endeavor. And I have a friend of mine that says sustainability is a team sport. And I absolutely believe that. And whenever we have customers thank us for what we do, they're thank goodness you exist. Oh my God, you guys are such wonderful people doing what you do. I just remind them that we don't exist without them. And so unless there are brands that care about this and brands that want to build sustainable solutions. And then the only reason they're going to want to do that is that the public wants it, their consumers want it. And unless there's once consumers vote with their dollars to pay a little bit more potentially for something that's sustainable, that's how the system works. And then the brands get pressure to create sustainable solutions, and they need resources. So we're really just a supporting actor in this entire thing. And so when I built the business in 2000, my initial thought was that the brands don't have options. They don't have anyone supporting them. They're like you were explaining, you were striving to do the best thing possible. You were looking for solutions. They had to work. They can't be sustainable but not function properly either unless someone steps up and takes that responsibility. And in 2000, I didn't see any packaging companies stepping up to take that responsibility, to take the risk even to say, you know what, the future of packaging is going to be sustainable. We didn't see that. So we took that risk. We continue to take that risk every day as we develop and innovate new solutions. But it's upon the belief that's what the market wants. That's the public will. That's what our community needs, and that's what our world needs. And based upon that belief, we keep making we'll keep making it as long as you guys keep buying it, and we're seeing that grow. And I believe that the space of sustainable, especially and compostable packaging, is just on the early stages, and we're seeing rapid growth, and we expect to see that ongoing for quite a while.
Amazing stuff. And what's on your roadmap in the immediate future that you say, hey, we don't do this today, but we would like to, or we are already seeing demand in the marketplace for something we don't yet provide, but we want to? What do you see in the next 6, 12, 18 months that's super high on your priority list?
Yeah, I think there's two different kinds of things that we're focused on. One is making things easy for the customer. We want to make this an easy decision. So there's two ways that we're doing that. One is we've recently implemented, and it's been a while, but we have circular packaging. When brands are engaging into this, they want to not only get a piece of packaging that solves their problem and functions and works, but it actually fully is circular. And we're making that really simple with click of the button, buy, use, return back to us, and we'll get that. So that's one part to make it easy. The other part that we're using is I like technology. My background's in technology. So we're going to make a very simple way for people to order online, not just to order stock products, but fully printed, customized packaging. Anything on our website will be able to be personalized or branded. And we want to make it really easy for people to get customized solutions, in addition to the fully custom options that we offer. So those are two things to make it easy for customers and brands to engage. The other area would be new products and development. Yeah, as I mentioned, our focus is last mile. We think that our customers care more about solving a sustainability problem than a packaging problem. Because they care about that, we're providing the widest breadth of solutions, things that they just can't get anywhere else, whether it be stand-up pouches with zippers or cannabis packaging or stretch wrap for pallets, tape for cartons, every little bit of plastic that they're interfacing with, we want to have a solution. We're focused on supplies for e-commerce. That's part of what we were going to speak about at B2B e-commerce, because there are a lot of e-commerce companies that care to make their offering completely sustainable. And so everything from the mailer to the label to the tape to the pallet wrap to everything in their shipment can be compostable. And when we offer
Wow.
those types of solutions, it's enabling B2B e-commerce companies to be the best that they want to be when it comes to sustainable. And it makes it easy for them. That's the point. So we got to make it easy and accessible.
Turnkey solutions.
Turnkey
Absolutely
solutions. Yeah.
love it. Rich, this has been a fantastic conversation. Hour has absolutely flown by. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And now as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to my guest. I get to let them ask me one question, any question they like. So, Rich from Elevate Packaging, what is your question for me today?
Where do you think B might be going when it comes to sustainability, and what are the hot topics in the next year or two for B2B e-commerce?
Man, that's such a great question. I think that D2C and B2C have had to, for at least a decade, they've had to have at least a veneer of greenwashing. They've had to at least have the veneer of sustainability, eco-mindedness, etc. Whereas in the B2B side of things, that hasn't really been the case until more recently. But oftentimes, those B2B products ultimately end up in retail consumers' hands, ultimately, whether that be being sold to a business that is then a reseller or a retailer, and those goods are ultimately ending up in the consumer's hands. So that pressure from the end consumer looking for products that at least appear to be and state that they're eco-friendly, I think that pressure is being pushed further and further up the supply chain. So what was once an afterthought for most B2B brands and really wasn't a major consideration, they're having pressure put on them by their buyers to say, look, we now need to have the right accreditation, certifications on the packaging, on the inners, on the outers. We need to be just as eco-friendly all the way up the supply chain as we are just at the consumer-facing portion of the supply chain. So just like SEO never used to be a thing for B2B, sustainability never used to be a thing for B2B either. But they're realizing, geez, when our buyers are looking for products, there's 71% of those searches for new suppliers are starting online. SEO now is important to B2B brands. So is sustainability becoming important for B2B brands. My point is that a lot of things that were never on B2B's radar, including sustainability, now suddenly are on B2B's radar. So I see this just growing in importance over the next decade. No question about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's encouraging. It makes a lot of sense. That's usually how it happens. It makes a lot of sense. And I feel good because I feel like we're ahead of the game a bit with some of our B2B packaging solutions. And looking forward to, hopefully we'll meet some of your listeners and viewers and help them with that challenge.
Hopefully we can send some additional business your way. Rich, it's been a fantastic conversation. I've super appreciated it. I can't wait to speak to you again soon, my friend. This was a great chat.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much, Jason.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.